With the season being that it is, especially with it just all saying on halt mode right now,
Uh-huh.
where do you says the Memphis Grizzlies season right now? If it were to pick up today, and if we were to start playoffs today, how would you feel about the team going forward?
Well, I think my perspective on the season was it was pretty much a developmental year, and any amount of success that they had was pretty much bonus and gravy. And so the fact that they've been competitive at the very least, and even in the playoff hunt, is pretty amazing. So I've already considered the season a success, even if they were to fall out of the playoffs. Like if the season would have never gotten shut down. And they would have fallen out of the playoffs. I think just the amount of games that they've won, the level at which John Morant has played, some of the trades that they made, the young pieces that they have, the future is pretty bright, and I think this season was about establishing that. So, in general, that's kind of the basis how I see the season. Now, if it were to pick up right now, and who knows what's going to happen? They may start directly with the playoffs. They may play a few games. Who knows what they're going to do? I think if they were to make it into the playoffs, there's a pretty good chance they would get swept in the first round. Maybe they take a game because they're going to be playing the Lakers, and I think you know it's a pretty tough matchup for us just because of even the size that they have, and it's going to be hard for Ja to score in the paint against those guys just because they got Anthony Davis and Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee, and then got LeBron James, a lot of big bodies that they have to throw at Morant, who thrives on getting in the paint. So it's not a great matchup for us. So if we were to make the playoffs and the season were to resume, it would be fun from the standpoint of it'd be great just to see basketball again, and specifically Memphis Grizzlies basketball again. But my expectations wouldn't be high. Like I said, I think the season's already a success because Ja Morant's really good, because our team's been better than everyone expected earlier, and we've got a lot of young pieces to look forward to. One wild card that I would really be excited about is just being able to see, Justice Winslow for the first time, who we gave up a lot
Mm-hmm.
for. We traded it was a pretty massive trade to get Justice Winslow, so
Yep.
we haven't seen him play yet, and so to see him on the court would be really interesting. And that would probably be the most interesting part of the season continuing, is just getting to see what he looks like sitting next to John Morant, Jaren Jackson, and the rest of the young squad. So, in general, I'm pretty happy about the Grizzlies season. It's a bummer that that we had to hit this pandemic the way we did, because it kind of interrupted a pretty exciting season for them. But in general, they weren't going to win a championship this year, so I'm not that bummed. And if anything, I'm just more excited about next season and the season after that.
And you're not the only one to say that the Memphis Grizzlies would get swept in the playoffs. Like, you're not alone in that boat, but I've seen in the past, even though it's different players, different coaches, different time, where someone would doubt the Memphis Grizzlies. Like, you know all too well what happened in that 2010 or 2011 postseason run against the San Antonio Spurs, 1 versus 8, and that's what actually got me
Yeah.
hooked into being a Grizzlies fan. And that I could give you a legitimate argument, and you might dismiss me, but everyone else has. But I'll just put it for you. I'll put it to you this way: point guard wise, there's no one outside unless you put LeBron James on Ja Morant. There's no point guard on the Lakers that can contain him. Essentially, now you go to the shooting guards. You got Dylan Brooks. Yes, you can put Danny Green or whoever, or Avery Bradley if you wanted to for defensive purposes. I mean, you probably give that little edge to the Lakers, but you can legitimately make a case for Dylan Brooks that he can handle his one-on-one matchup. And then obviously, like LeBron, at the four, there's no containing him. Now you get to that. Now you get to that 5 spot. Before I get to Anthony Davis, you get to that 5 spot with Giannis Valanciunas, who is a rebounding machine. And that is key to getting the ball from teams like the Warriors when they're shooting threes like crazy, or the Lakers or the Clippers or the Bucks, where they just want to run up and down the court on you and get in the paint. When you got Giannis down there, who can not only shoot but distribute and rebound the ball against like Dwight Howard or Shaqtin' a Fool, JaVale McGee, or DeMarcus Cousins on his 3th, 4th, 5th torn Achilles right now. I mean, You seriously could not convince me that Giannis Valanciunas couldn't handle his matchup. And then you get to the fourth matchup with Anthony Davis and Jaren Jackson Jr., to where you could, if you had a gun pointed at my head and saying, like, who are you taking, Anthony or Jaren? I'm obviously taking, Anthony, but that's not to say that Jaren couldn't give him any fits down the paint, especially last year in the limited time we did see him in New Orleans versus Jaren Jackson during his rookie year. He gave Anthony Davis some fits. And there's also the factor of, now I know there's been a big layoff with the season, but if you look at that last matchup against the Grizzlies and the Lakers in Memphis, yes, it was the fourth game, and maybe the Lakers didn't need it as much as they did. Number one seed they are. But you look at how we won that game without most of our players because of injuries. Now if we were to so to speak jump into the postseason, all hands on deck essentially with the Memphis Grizzlies and the Lakers. There's not many big injuries to speak of, if any at all. Any big injuries outside of maybe LeBron's nagging groin from last season ago. But if I were to place a few bets or something, I would give the Grizzlies. It would go like this if we were to meet in the playoffs. It would be the Lakers take game 1, then the Grizzlies would take game 2, just slightly, and then the wild card would be game 3, as is with most Grizzlies matchups over the past few years, where you could legitimately see the NBA realm go up in flames if the Grizzlies go up 2-1, and then everyone's like, what the hell's going on with the Lakers? Like, LeBron, what the hell are you doing? To where come game 4, 5, and 6, LeBron, either by Frank Vogel's choice or LeBron's choice, to where it's okay, because I think if we're going to win 2 games, which I honestly think we can, it's going to be because of Ja Morant and the sheer will that he has carrying this team this year. So I'm thinking we win 2 games, and then after game 3, LeBron is going to be put on Ja Morant, and then they'll just win out from the rest of there. Then they'll win the series 4-2, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think those are fair points. I think the difference is when you get to the playoffs, and the difference between this team and the team in the past that has made some of these runs is just experience. The playoffs are such a different type of game than the regular season, and we don't have a single guy, really, a key player on our roster who has legitimate, playoff experience. And so, and you're talking about, you can go matchup by matchup, and sure, maybe the Grizzlies could win a couple of those different matchups, but the fact that the Lakers have the 2 best players on the court by a large margin. I mean, not saying that Ja Morant or Jaren Jackson couldn't be that good eventually, but right now, I mean, you would take LeBron James and Anthony Davis just as a player over anybody on the Grizzlies roster, and those 2 guys alone, I think when the playoffs, when it matters, when it counts the most, you're not going to catch them being lazy or not trying hard. They're going to go all out. And so I think what would probably happen is I think the Lakers would probably win game 1 and game 2, and then maybe the Grizzlies could sneak out game 3 at home with the full arena at the FedEx Forum. Maybe there's the hype and the emotion. They could win a close game, and then the Lakers would close them out game 4 and 5 after that. So
that's feasible.
I would say best case scenario in my mind would be the Lakers win 4-1. But I'd love to be surprised. I just don't think it's realistic this year, and I think that's okay. I think the expectations can't be you should win 2 games. I think if they won 1 game, that would be a huge success considering how young and inexperienced they are.
Yeah.
And the team they're going against is probably the favorite to win the championship.
Yeah.
So,
And I mean, also to add on top of that, that's also a feasible point, and also a feasible point towards my argument is that every single matchup we've had outside of I think game 1. Against the Lakers, which was pretty much a blowout essentially. But game 2 in Memphis, when we had those throwback Vancouver jerseys on, it was just one flipping point that we just missed it by. While they were riding high on their win streak, and we were just picking up, and we were just trying to figure out what we were doing, and we still had Jay Crowder on the team. And Ja Morant, even though he was having the minute restrictions because the unwritten rule of having minute restrictions for a rookie, which I still don't understand these days, but I get it, but it is what it was. But there's feasible credence there that not only does yes, Memphis doesn't have the experience for playoff wise, but you look at the Lakers, like outside of the obvious, like big goat in the room that is LeBron James. All you have is Dwight Howard, who carried the Orlando Magic team so many years ago. It seems like ancient history against the Lakers, which he got swept, by the way. And then you have JaVale McGee, who rode the coattails of the Golden State Warriors, essentially, of Steph Curry, Klay, and Kevin Durant, and Draymond Green. And then you go down the roster after that, like what experience is there on their part? So,
well, they've got Danny Green.
Danny Green, Danny Green with the Raptors last year.
Even Anthony Davis has had some playoff series. Obviously, he hasn't had a ton of experience. That's why he left New Orleans. But any experience is better than none, just because it's such a different game. Every NBA player says the same thing, that when you get to the playoffs, the defense is more intense, the energy is more intense, everyone's more locked in, and so it's a little hard to compare a regular season game just any given night of the week when the Grizzlies are in LA or the Lakers are in Memphis. It's just hard to compare that and use those results as any kind of indicator of what would happen in the playoffs, because the playoffs are such a different game. Now, the wild card is there's a lot of young, super raw, talented players on the Grizzlies who any given night could explode and have an incredible night. However, I think expecting that would be unfair because I don't think it's likely to happen. But who knows? I mean, I would be happy just to watch, even if they got in the playoffs and lost 4 straight games by 20 points. I'd love to see just more basketball anyway.
Yeah, and just right off that last part, just seeing basketball. What was your first reaction when you first heard the news that Rudy Gobert and others had COVID-19 and tested positive? Like, what was your reaction when you first heard that not only that the NBA, they were actually one of the first leagues to do it, to shut down the leagues because of COVID-19. What was your reaction when it just all hit you at once?
Well, I think, leading up to that night, there was already a lot of talk about taking fans out of stadiums. I remember even listening to the radio here locally, and 2 nights before that, I think the Grizzlies had a home game, and
against the Magic,
and a lot of people were saying, "Is this going to be the last game that Memphis fans get to go see in person for the rest of the season?" They were talking like it was potentially the end of fans in the stadium, so that you knew something might happen. But then what was funny was we had our youth group was going on that night, and I had just gotten done preaching a message. I came off the stage to a bunch of notifications about it, and then started reading it and found out, they were shutting it down. And I think even when it initially happened, it seemed like to me, at least in my mind, I was like, oh, well, they're going to have to shut this down for a minute, get everything back under control, delay the season for a couple weeks, and then pick it back up. Obviously, I don't think anyone expected it to unravel the way it did, both in the NBA and even across the country, just how quickly everything shut down and how intensely everything shut down. And now I think there's a real possibility they don't finish the season. I think that's still up in the air. I'm hopeful that maybe they could figure out some sort of system where they could play games with no fans. Even that would be better than nothing. But I think my reaction was, my specific reaction about Rudy Gobert was, at first it was kind of funny, because if you remember, the night before he had been rubbing all the microphones and kind of making fun of the whole thing. And so for him to be the one that got it, I was like, man, that's a bad look for Rudy Gobert. But initially, I was obviously surprised, just like everybody else. But I think when my first thought about it, I didn't realize how big of a deal it was until much later. Yeah,
because there's talks that with Texas opening up, being one of the first states to be able to reopen their economy for what was being touted at the task force with President Trump and the doctors given their blessing to it, with the 3 phases, which essentially phase 1, we open back up, and then phase 3, we're all out of it essentially, and we're back to normalcy. But with you do have out there the MLBs working on a league bubble out in Arizona. There's talks about the NBA having their own bubble in Las Vegas, considering we've had the summer leagues there, and that essentially we would start the playoffs, in my opinion, straight on, and then have all 16 teams in hotels and practice facilities, and then like commence the games from there. Like, I mean, just to salvage anything from the season, because I do not think, unless you are going to compromise the following season, you are not going to resume any regular season games, in my opinion. I think it's all. Yeah, it's all.
I think the reason they would try to finish is, one, they're not making any money right now. They need the revenue, and then two, just from the standpoint of like, think about a team like, you know, the Lakers, for example, or really any team. You think about the Milwaukee Bucks, who have Giannis Antetokounmpo is about to be a free agent next year, and they were the favorite in the East, had a chance to win the title. To take this season away from them makes it that much more of a risk that Giannis could leave. There's so many implications for not finishing the season, at least giving teams that are good a chance to finish out and see if they can win the championship.
Mm-hmm.
That messes up so much stuff for the future that I feel like they're going to try to get it done, even if it means they push back next season to start in December or something, which I think is a real possibility at this point, just because they're going to have to make up so much time. And I think, and on the bubble city thing, I saw Adam Silver said the other day that he had talked about that and they had heard that proposal, but they wasn't seriously considering it. So unless something changes, it doesn't seem like that's going to be the avenue. I think the avenue that it sounded like Adam Silver was waiting on was just more testing. I mean, that's what he said. He said, if we can get to the point where we can test all these guys on a regular basis, then he would feel better about starting. But who knows? It changes every day, and it changes so fast that you never really know how it's going to play out.